Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Jordan James. May I proceed?
You may.
Please tell us your name.
How's it going? My name is Jordan James.
Mr. James, are you familiar with the defendant?
Yeah, that's Danny Dawson. He's a regular at my bar.
How do you know Mr. Dawson?
He came to my bar a lot. I'm a bartender. I work at Chuggy's. We also played softball together.
Mr. James, how did you get into bartending?
I started about 3 years ago. I was in college getting my undergrad with a major in music, but that wasn't really the track for me. I'm still really into music. I'm in a band, but the bills had to be paid. I needed to make some money, and bartending was a good way to do it. I'm good at it.
And how long have you been bartending at Chuggy's?
For a year and a half now. I used to bartend down south, Gulf Shores, at a tourist trap, the Hangout. Not a good place to go, but I love Chuggy's now. It's a great place.
Now, you said Mr. Dawson was one of your best customers. How often did he come into the bar?
Danny came in quite often. He worked nearby, so he'd come in sometimes for lunch, most days after work. $2 Tuesdays were a big night for him. Thursdays, karaoke night, he came in a lot. Usually would bring big groups with him on the weekend, too.
Did he drink a lot when he would come into the bar?
I'd say yes. Danny was one of my best customers in that he'd buy a lot of alcohol. Most nights he'd come to the bar to drink.
And what kind of drinker was he?
Definitely a social one. More times than not, he was with a big group. He loved to entertain, he loved to bring people to Chuggy's, because it's a really relaxed environment, big open space, especially when there's a concert going on.
Now, Mr. Dawson drinking so much, were you ever concerned about him getting home?
Yes, absolutely. Any bartender would be when you've got your customers drinking. But that's one of the things I really like most about Danny. He was never afraid to hand over the keys. He was a drinker, but he wasn't a drinker and a driver.
And what would happen if Mr. Dawson didn't give up his keys?
Well, someone would come pick him up, or maybe one of the friends that was there wasn't drinking and they'd all ride back together.
Objection, relevance.
Response.
Your Honor, this line of questioning goes to rebut the prosecution's claim that Mr. Dawson is reckless. This goes to show that when he felt that he was not okay to drive, he would take a taxi home, or he would give up his keys so that he wouldn't have to drive.
We haven't offered any evidence that the defendant had a character trait for recklessness. We're showing that on the night of September 24th, 2010, he acted with extreme recklessness. What he did in the past has no bearing on whether he acted recklessly on the night in question. It's not relevant.
I'll sustain the objection.
Mr. James, I'd like to talk to you about the night of September 24th, 2010. Do you remember that night?
I do, yes.
What were you doing?
I was working. It was a big night for Chuggy's. There was a local band coming in. It was going to be packed that night, and I was doing what I always do, bartending and singing.
Did Mr. Dawson come into the bar that night?
He did, actually earlier in the day. Something about an interview brought him close to the bar, so he came in around 2.
And was he drinking that day when he came in?
He was, yes. The bar was pretty dead around 2, so he and I actually got to catch up. He ordered some lunch, I think from about 2 to 7, had about 3 drinks.
And do you remember why he came into Chuggy's that day?
Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, there was a band coming, but he was also meeting a group of friends to celebrate someone's 21st birthday.
Do you remember, or excuse me, do you recall personally how many drinks that Mr. Dawson had that night?
Just the evening or throughout the entire day?
Throughout the entire day.
Me personally, I didn't send more than 6 or 7 drinks his way.
And who was making his drinks that day?
That would be me. I'm the only bartender at Chuggy's. We don't really have the wait staff to really get more than one bartender behind there at a time. And so I was making the drinks the entire night when it was packed, when it wasn't, and I know I didn't send more than 6 or 7 his way.
Now, over what period of time did Mr. Dawson drink those 6 or 7 drinks?
Like I said, he got there around 2 p.m. Left a little bit before 1 a.m., so about 11 hours.
Your Honor, I pass it.
May I have a moment to set up a demonstrative and receive retrieve Plaintiffs 2 from the bench.
You may.
Receipt. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
You just told us that you think that on the night in total, you didn't send Mr. Dawson more than 6 or 7 drinks.
Him personally, yes.
I'd like to walk you through all of the drinks that Mr. Dawson ordered that night. He got to the bar at about 2 p.m., correct?
That's right, he came after an interview.
And you kept records of what he ordered that night, correct?
That's right.
You kept them on receipts?
Sure.
You recognize those receipts?
Absolutely.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
These are the receipts from when the defendant was in the bar on September 24th, correct?
That's right.
And that first one, it's Exhibit 2. That's from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., correct?
That's right.
That bar receipt says he ordered a beer.
That's right.
He had 3 whiskey and ginger ales.
That's right.
The next receipt, that's everything after 7 p.m., correct?
That's right. When his friends got there, they mostly had all of the drinks ordered on one tab. I guess he was buying the drinks that night for the birthday girl.
This is an enlarged version of the receipt you had in your hand, correct? Is that the same?
Sure, yeah.
So the first drink he ordered was 1 whiskey.
Black Label whiskey, yes. It's a high-end whiskey.
Then he ordered 2 screwdrivers.
Yes, for the 2 ladies that were with him, I believe.
He had 2 lemon drop shots.
That's right. One for him, and I believe another one for his friend, for the birthday girl.
Then a beer.
That's right.
Then 2 more screwdrivers.
For the girls, yes. Not for him to drink personally.
Then another 2 screwdrivers.
For the girls, not for him.
Another 2 screwdrivers.
That's right. The girls like screwdrivers.
And then another 2 screwdrivers.
Yet around midnight, 45 minutes before they left, he ordered one more round for the girls before they made the drive home.
Then he finished it off with a tequila sunrise.
That's right.
This is only the drinks that Mr. Dawson bought, correct?
Paid for, yes, that's right.
So it doesn't include drinks that he was given for free?
If he was given drinks for free, no, they're not recorded on the receipts because we don't actually charge them for them now.
Well, you had a shot with him at the bar, didn't you?
That's right.
That's not on the receipt?
No, it's not.
At the end of the night, the defendant came to pay his receipt, correct?
His tab, yes. His second.
He said, "Thanks for keeping the drinks coming."
That's right. He had 6 or 7 over the course of 11 hours, so he was with me for a while.
He said, "Thanks for making them strong."
That's right. I was making his alcoholic beverages.
And then he said he was going to get his friends home in record time.
Sure.
I have no further questions. Would you like me to take down the demonstrative? There's a redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
May I approach the witness and retrieve the exhibits?
You may.
Thank you.
And the witness can say that. Call your next witness.
The defense calls Ashley Norton to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, I'm Dr. Ashley Norton.
And how are you involved in this case today?
I'm here because I assessed the validity of the breath alcohol test performed on Mr. Dawson.
Now, before we talk about those tests or the validity, can you tell us, where did you go to school?
I received my undergraduate degree in chemistry from Brown University, and then I went on to receive my master's degree and my PhD from Johns Hopkins University. My husband and I moved here to Midland Center. I teach at Midland State University. I teach medicine.
Now, when you are called to do cases like this, what type of facts and data do you usually need?
I usually look at the test itself. I examine the kind of machine used to test the breath to alcohol ratio. I also, in this case, interviewed Mr. Dawson and spoke with him about the events of that night.
And did you have access to these facts and data in this case?
I did.
Now, what type of procedures and methods would you use to apply to those facts?
Well, usually what I do is I take a formula that I have developed in my experience doing these kinds of tests, and I apply that to the facts that I have. I try to come up with a blood alcohol concentration using that formula.
And did you apply the facts and data, did you apply the principles and methods to the facts and data in this case?
Yes, I did.
Now, you said that you tested the validity of this BRAC test. Can you explain to us what that is?
Well, I looked at the BAC test, and I determined that there were two major problems with the blood alcohol concentration test that was given to Mr. Dawson.
Now, let's talk about those two problems, but break them down. Can you tell us about the first problem that you had with the test?
The first problem I have has to do with an inherent error with the machine that was used. The Intoxilyzer 8000 uses a standard ratio to measure breath alcohol against blood alcohol.
Now, doctor, I haven't taken math in a long time. Can you explain to me what a ratio is?
I mean, it's basically a comparison of two things. Think of a student-teacher ratio. In this case, you would have the breath being the students to the blood being the teacher. There's more students than there are teachers, but you have a ratio to compare those two things.
Now, how does that apply to this case?
Well, in this case, the machine that was used to test Mr. Dawson assumes that everyone has the same ratio of breath alcohol to blood alcohol.
You had a visual aid that you used to help explain this fact to me. Do you think it would be helpful for the jury to see a demonstration?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, may the witness make use of the demonstrative.
Yes.
Would you like to step down?
So, in this case, the Intoxilyzer 8000, the machine that was used to test Mr. Dawson, uses a standard ratio of, we'll say this is 2.1 liters of deep lung breath to, thank you, 1 cubic centimeter of human blood, represented here by this little wooden cube. Now, the problem is this ratio, 2.1 liters of breath to 1 cubic centimeter of human blood, that doesn't hold true for every individual.
How does it differ between individuals?
Well, for some people, say if they have a very high tolerance to alcohol, say I drink a lot, and so I have a high tolerance, my breath to blood ratio would be smaller. So it would take less of my lung breath to equal 1 cubic centimeter of human blood. It can go all the way down to 0.9 liters of lung breath to 1 cubic centimeter of my blood. Now, say you didn't drink at all. You would have a very high ratio. It would take 3.4 liters of your lung breath to equal 1 cubic centimeter of your blood.
Now, what does that have to do with the case today?
Well, the problem is, if someone has a lower ratio or a higher ratio, the machine doesn't account for that. Say you test me, and I drink a lot, I have a high tolerance, I have a low breath to blood ratio. The Intoxilyzer 8000 well, let's see, my breath to blood ratio, it's 0.9 liters to 1 cubic centimeter of human blood. Now, if the Intoxilyzer 8000 tested me, it would take too much air. There would be more alcohol in this air than there would be in 1 cubic centimeter of human blood. It would actually be twice that amount. My BAC would register twice as high as it actually is.
So, what does that have to do with the case today? The ratios?
Well, in this case, if Mr. Dawson, like, say me, had a very high tolerance, if he was a regular drinker, then the test would have taken too much. His blood alcohol concentration would have registered higher than it was in reality.
Thank you. You can take your seat. Now, you said you had 2 problems with this test. Can you explain to us what that second problem was?
The second problem is something that we call residual alcohol in the mouth.
Can you explain to us what that means?
It's like when you eat an onion. You have onion breath, and the onion breath sticks around for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. The same is true if you ingest anything or if you regurgitate anything. The alcohol contained in your stomach acid and in your body naturally, or any of the food or drink that you've had, will stay in your mouth for 15 minutes.
What are examples of things that could cause residual mouth alcohol?
Anything you ingest will cause you to have residual alcohol in the mouth. Gastric events, regurgitation, if someone vomits, if someone burps, if they have acid reflux, that's going to cause there to be residual alcohol in their mouth, and it's going to take 15 minutes for that alcohol to dissipate.
Now, earlier on in the trial, Dr. Avery Smith said that this would cause a spike in the machine. Is that always the case?
Unfortunately, with the Intoxilyzer 8000, there's a rate of error. The machine will not always register. It sometimes will not register an error message if there is residual alcohol in the mouth. Instead of registering an error message, it will read out an incorrect or higher blood alcohol concentration.
Thank you. No further questions.
You may proceed. Your Honor, before I begin, let the record reflect that I'm going to the bench to tender States 1. The record will so reflect. And may I also set up a demonstrative? You may.
Good evening, Dr. Norton.
Hi.
Now, this isn't your first time you've testified in court, is it?
No, sir, I do this a lot.
You've testified over 100 times in court.
I have.
And in those 100 times you've testified, have you ever been hired by the prosecution?
Well, no, they have officers who administer breath tests. They don't contract that out to private parties like myself.
Have you ever been hired by a plaintiff?
No, usually drug driving cases, the kind that I testified for, are criminal cases, so there is no plaintiff.
So in 100 cases, you've only testified for the defense?
Well, yes, the state won't hire me, and DUIs are primarily criminal.
Now, you're being paid for your testimony today, correct?
Of course.
You're being paid $250 an hour.
That's about right.
And you've already been paid $5,000 for the work that you've previously done.
I have.
And you're being paid $2,000 for sitting in that chair and giving your testimony today.
Yes, that's right.
So you're being paid $7,000 in total for your testimony.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to the equation that you used. Now, in the equation that you used, you needed several variables, correct?
I did. I needed the amount of alcohol that Mr. Dawson ingested. I also needed things like his body weight. I needed his rate of elimination.
Now, one of the things that you used was the number of drinks that the defendant had.
That's right.
Now, you're familiar with the bar receipt from Chuggy's?
I am.
And if you were handed one, you would be able to determine what that is.
Of course.
This is a bar receipt from Chuggy's on the night of the crash?
Yes, this is one of Mr. Dawson's receipts.
And with that, is this a fair and accurate representation of what you have in your hands?
Looks about right.
Now, I'd like to walk you through the drinks that Mr. Dawson told you he had after his friends had gone.
Okay.
Or after his friends had gone.
Okay.
Now, he told you he had a black label receipt.
Yes.
And he told you that he had a shot.
Yes.
He told you he drank a Midlands brown pint.
Yes.
And he told you he drank a tequila sunrise.
Yes, that's what he told me.
But Dr. Norton, there are 10 screwdrivers on here.
Yes, he bought those for his friends.
But there are 10 drinks on here that you did not count in your equation, correct?
No, because I had the advantage of being able to interview Mr. Dawson, and so he was able to walk me through this receipt and explain to me the drinks that he bought for himself and drink, and the drinks that he bought for his friends and drink.
Now, were you at the scene? Were you at the crash scene?
No, sir, I was hired after the accident happened.
So do you know if there was residual alcohol in the blood?
Yes.
Do you know this by being on the scene and seeing him regurgitate?
No, actually, no one knows that, but Mr. Dawson did tell me that he had heartburn that night, which is a symptom of acid reflux.
Now, Dr. Norton, you came to the conclusion that the defendant was drunk.
I can't say for sure what his blood alcohol concentration was. But if it is correct based on the facts that I had, then you would be correct.
But just for clarity, you came to the conclusion that the defendant was indeed drunk, correct?
If my calculations of his blood alcohol concentration, based on the limited amount of information I had, was correct, then yes.
And in fact, based on the limited amount of data that you had, you concluded that he was too drunk to drive.
Objection, Your Honor. This is an improper expert testimony. She is not a legal expert. This is a legal conclusion. She's not being asked just to recite what the legal limit is. She's being asked to recite whether the defendant was too drunk to drive. That is something that the jury in this case will have to decide itself.
Response?
May I confer with counsel?
Briefly.
Your Honor, this is not a legal opinion. Rather, this is a medical opinion. They're not saying, my question was not legally, did he have too much to drink? Rather, from a medicinal standpoint, did he, was he too drunk to drive?
I'll sustain the objection.
But that evening, you concluded that the defendant was indeed drunk.
If his blood alcohol concentration was above 0.08, yes.
And your conclusion was that it was?
No.
Do you remember giving an affidavit?
Yes.
And you have seen the affidavit before?
I have.
Let the record reflect that I'm approaching opposing counsel with the affidavit. I am referencing line 167. Okay. Now, the affidavit. Thank you. Now,
remind me to ask the judge to approach the witness.
oh yes.
Did you say 167?
167. Yes. And could you read along with me? I'm on 167.
Yes.
It says, absolutely not, is how the line begins.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper impeachment.
How so?
The opposing counsel has not properly made sure that this affidavit has not been able to change, or is even the affidavit that this witness signed.
I'll clarify.
Please do.
And is this your signature at the end of the affidavit?
Yes, it is.
And there has been no changes to this affidavit, even though you knew that you could.
Right, I looked at it this morning.
Now, may I read from line 167? It seems inarguable to me that Danny Dawson was too drunk to drive.
Objection, Your Honor. We've already ruled on this, that this is an improper expert opinion.
The opinion that I'm
Is
asking
it going anywhere different than the last time?
The opinion that I'm asking for is simply that he was drunk, not necessarily that he was too drunk to drive.
You just asked that, is the defendant too drunk to drive?
But I think this goes to the point of impeachment, so now he's using it to impeach the witness, so I'll allow it at this point.
The point that I'm, just for clarity, the point that I'm trying to make is that he was indeed drunk, not that he was, the point that he was too drunk. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, you asked me if his blood alcohol concentration was above 0.08. I can't tell you that. The line above it says, now am I saying Danny Dawson had a blood alcohol concentration of less than 0.08? No, because I don't know his blood alcohol concentration.
But you could determine that he was indeed drunk.
If my calculations are correct, then yes, but I don't know his blood alcohol concentration. I'm sorry.
Right. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions. May I approach the witness to retrieve the affidavit and then also retender Exhibit 1?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Witness may step down.
May I take down the demonstrative?
You may. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Leslie Roman. May I proceed?
You may.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
So my name is Leslie Roman.
Ms. Roman, how do you know Danny Dawson?
I was hired by Mr. Dawson to complete an accident reconstruction of the night of the accident.
What qualifies you to complete an accident reconstruction?
Well, I have a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. I also am an accredited accident reconstructionist. I teach accident reconstruction classes as well as driving school on the side. And I've owned and operated my own accident reconstruction firm for nearly a decade now.
All right, well, Ms. Roman, what sort of facts do you usually look at when conducting an accident reconstruction?
Well, I take into account the standard procedure for accident reconstruction. So I go to the site and I look at the site, I survey it for data. I also look at the vehicle in question and I gather facts there. I read the police report and any relevant affidavits in the case and any other evidence that the police have collected.
Did you have those facts in today's case?
Yes, absolutely. I went to the site on Canyon Road and I surveyed the site. I looked at the 2009 Chevy Impala that was involved in the accident. I read the affidavits of Mr. Dawson, Ms. Hobson, and London Bennett. I also I read the FCT report.
All right, well, Ms. Roman, what sort of method do you have when conducting an accident reconstruction?
Well, I look at what should have happened. I look at what actually happened, and then I try to find the causation of what happened.
Well, when you were, did you apply that method reliably to the facts in today's case?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now, when you were explaining to me this whole accident reconstruction, you used the diagram to do that. Do you think it would be helpful to the jury if you could use that diagram right now?
Yes, absolutely.
Your Honor, may the witness step up to make use of a demonstrative? Mr. Roman, can you go ahead and step up here? Well, first of all, can you go ahead and tell us what it is that we're looking at?
Yes, this is the accident reconstruction diagram that I created for this case. Some of the things you see on here, this is the initial point where Mr. Dawson exited the roadway on the east side. This is where Mr. Dawson drove outside of the shoulder. This is where Mr. Dawson re-entered the roadway because of the conditions of the road. This is where Mr. Dawson impacted a tree and a utility pole.
All right, well, before we talk about exactly what happened on the night of the accident, can we talk a little bit about the road? What kind of road is it? I see it's a curved road here.
Yes, it's a curved road. It's actually an extremely dangerous road in my opinion.
What makes you say that it's an extremely dangerous road?
Well, it's in a heavily forested area. There's a lot of trees. There's a lot of trees growing very, very closely to the roadway. The tree that Mr. Dawson hit is actually 30 inches away from the roadway. It's very close. There's a very narrow shoulder. The downgrade is 40%, so it's quite steep. There's a lot of animals in the area and wildlife as well. And of course, the curve itself makes it very, very dangerous, and the guardrail at that point did not extend the full length of the dangerous curve.
Mr. Roman, this might sound like kind of a silly question, but what are guardrails for?
Well, guardrails are very simply to keep your vehicle from impacting things like trees and utility poles, to keep your vehicle from driving off the side of a cliff, or to keep your vehicle from totaling.
Were there guardrails on this road before the accident occurred?
No, but, well, there was guardrail, but it does not extend around the most dangerous part of the curve.
Can you use this red marker to show us where it does extend before the accident?
Yes, this is the guardrail on that long side.
Is that coming up here? You want to use the black marker? Okay, it's there. Okay, that's fine.
This is what the guardrail was on the night of the accident.
Has that changed since the accident occurred?
Yes, the guardrail has been extended approximately 105 feet.
Objection, subsequent remedial measures.
Response? Your Honor, that rule really doesn't apply in this case. Subsequent remedial measures is a rule that applies in product liability cases. If you look at the rule of the law, if you look at the wording in the rule of the law, it refers several times to the three defects that we look at in product liability cases: manufacturing defect, design defect, and warning labels defect. In this case, this is not a product liability case. We're not trying to shift the burden onto the prosecution, so that rule really doesn't apply in this case.
Prosecution?
Your Honor, the subsequent remedial measures rule applies to prevent, effectively as a policy measure. It's to not discourage people from taking steps to make their products safer. While it's true that the city of Midland Center is not on trial right now, it's important that in future cases, were a civil issue to come up, this not be brought up.
Objections overruled.
So, Ms. Roman, has that changed since the accident occurred?
Yes, it's been extended 105 feet southward.
Can you go ahead and draw that extension?
Yes, I can. It's been extended about 105.
Okay. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the accident reconstruction that you did. You mentioned that one of the first things you look at is what a person should have done.
That's right.
So in this case, what is a person supposed to do when they drive off a road?
Well, I teach driving to teens on the side, and what I always tell my students is that if you're in a hazardous driving situation, the most important thing you can do is to remain calm and not to panic.
Why is it important to remain calm, and why is it important not to panic?
The goal in any hazardous driving situation is to maintain control of your vehicle. And if you don't remain calm, if you're panicking, then there's a greater likelihood that you're going to slam on the brake. You're going to veer sharply to try to get back on the road. And those two things are extremely dangerous because you can end up flipping your vehicle.
Were you able to determine what Mr. Dawson did that night?
Yes, I was.
Objection, lack of foundation. May I be heard?
Your name?
Pursuant to Rule 702, 3 things must be established. Ms. Rowan must testify that she used a method that is commonly relied upon in her field, that she applied that method reliably to the facts and data in today's case, and that she had sufficient facts and data. While Ms. Rowan has explained what method she used, she has not testified that that method is commonly relied upon in her field. Until that foundation has been laid, she can't testify with her opinions.
I believe that the foundation was satisfied at the beginning of the direct. She did testify that she had sufficient facts and data. She testified that she used a reliable method in creating her accident reconstruction, and she testified that she applied those facts reliably to this case.
I will sustain the objection if we can go in a little bit more into what methodology she's using.
Yes, Your Honor.
In this specific.
Motion to strike any testimony on the record?
Yes.
Ms. Roman, what do you look at to determine what a person, what a driver in this case, actually did? What sort of facts do you look at?
Well, of course, we look at the affidavits, what the driver actually says that he did. We look at the police report, the evidence that the police have compiled that actually says what he did as well. We also, I've gone to the scene on Canyon Road. I've looked at the rutting on the grass on the western side. I've looked at the vehicle and seen the indentations in the vehicle that show where it hit the tree and the utility pole. I can conclusively say that I know the scope of the accident and what happened to the vehicle.
How would the rutting in the grass created by a vehicle help you determine where the car drove?
Well, the tires make tracks in the road, and if you follow the rutting, you can see where the car actually drove in the grass.
Is that a common method in your field to follow the rutting in the road to figure out where the car went?
Yes, it's absolutely standard procedure in accident reconstruction. All accident reconstruction is use this method.
And did you apply what you saw and what you read in the police report to this case?
Of course, yes. I do.
So based on what you looked at and based on what the police report said, how did Mr. Dawson drive that night?
Well, Mr. Dawson was driving down the road this way, coming from this direction. Mr. Dawson swerved. He made an evasive maneuver at this point here, and he exited the roadway. Mr. Dawson maintained control for 124 feet before trying to gradually re-enter the roadway at this point, where because of the slippery conditions of the road, the wetness, he lost control of the vehicle and impacted the utility pole in the tree at this point.
Were you able to look at the angle at which the vehicle left the road?
Yes, I was.
And what did that angle, the angle that the vehicle left the road, what did that tell you?
Well, of course, in accident reconstruction, we're always looking for the cause of the accident. And so we always look at the angle at which the vehicle leaves the road. So the vehicle left the road at an angle which is consistent within maneuver for avoiding an object in the road, perhaps in this case an animal.
No further questions? Would you like me to take down the marker? Yes, please. Thank you. You can have a seat over here.
Cross-examination?
You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Ms. Norton.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
In their opening statement, the defense said that there's a lot we can't agree on today. But I want to start by talking about something we can agree on.
Yes.
We can agree that on September 24th, 2010, the defendant was driving above the speed limit, wasn't he?
Yes, according to my calculations, the defendant, Mr. Dawson, was driving at 51 miles per hour at the time he initially went off the road.
And the supposed speed limit is 35 miles per hour, isn't it?
That's right.
Now, Ms. Roman, you told us on direct examination that you believe that Canyon Road is dangerous.
Yes, it's a dangerous road.
You talked about some of the things that you think make this road dangerous.
That's right. Yeah, I mentioned the wildlife and that it's a narrow shoulder and that there's a lot of trees growing very close to the road.
Well, I want to talk about that wildlife in just a second. But first, let's talk about this guardrail.
Yes, the guardrail.
Ms. Roman, we can agree that a guardrail only takes effect until after someone has left their lane.
Yes, but there's an extremely narrow shoulder on Canyon Road, and so it's necessary to have a guardrail at all points.
So that's a yes.
I'm sorry, could you restate the question?
A guardrail only takes effect after someone has left their lane.
Oh, yes, of course.
So a guardrail can't stop someone from leaving their lane, can it?
No,
You also talked about how there's a lot of trees on Canyon Road, is that right?
that's right. It's very heavily forested.
Ms. Roman, there are no trees on Canyon Road, are there?
No, they're just very, very close to the roadway.
And Ms. Roman, we can agree that even if we were to cut down every tree by Canyon Road, we can't stop people from drinking and driving. Can we?
Objection, Your Honor. This question calls for speculation. Opposing counsel is posing a hypothetical and asking the witness to agree to it as if it were fact.
This is a common sense question. Ms. Roman can testify that cutting down trees doesn't prevent someone from drinking and driving.
Objection overruled.
So Ms. Roman, even if we were to cut down all the trees by Canyon Road, that wouldn't stop people from drinking and driving, could it?
Well, no, the two things are not related at all.
You told us on direct examination that you're a driving instructor, is that right?
Yes, I teach teen driving.
And you said the most important thing is to maintain control of the car, is that right?
No, I said the most important thing in a hazardous driving situation is to remain calm at all times.
And that's to maintain control of the car, is that right?
Yes, if you've driven off the road or something, but there's another car coming at you, you need to maintain control of your vehicle or else bad things can happen.
Ms. Roman, we can agree that if you're driving a car, it's the driver's responsibility to maintain a speed that they believe is safe.
Yes, definitely.
Ms. Roman, let's talk about why you're here. You're being paid by the defense, is that right?
Yes, I'm being paid by a standard rate.
Standard rate is $250 per hour.
That's right.
So far, you've received $500 for compiling your report.
Yes,
But in addition to that report, you're being paid $2,000 to testify today.
that's right, I am.
You talked about animals on the road, but just to be clear, Ms. Roman, you never investigated whether there was an animal when Mr. Dawson was on that road, did you?
Well, of course I investigated it. That's my job. Accident reconstruction calls for you to look at possible causes.
So surely you interviewed London Bennett to ask him whether he saw an animal, didn't you?
Well, I read Mr. Bennett's affidavit.
So that's a no. You never interviewed Mr. Bennett to see if there was an animal on that road, did you?
Well, no, in accident reconstructionists don't typically go out and find eyewitnesses and interview them. We generally rely on the police to provide us with the information, such as the affidavits that gives us our information to construct our reports.
You said you rely on the police,
Oh, well, yes, we read the police report.
but you didn't actually interview Detective Foster, did you?
No, in my line of work, we don't really do much interviewing, so no, I did not.
Now, Ms. Roman, just to be clear, in your investigation, you did not conduct a single interview to see if there was an animal on that road, did you?
No, we don't do interviews in accident reconstruction.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
No redirect, Your Honor. The other witness speaks. Your Honor, at this time, the defense rests.